The mountain stands quietly on the border between Austria and Germany. Its slopes calm/green and deceptively ordinary, yet for centuries it has been surrounded by whispers that refuse to fade. The Untersberg is not the tallest mountain in the Alps, nor the most dramatic, and yet it occupies a unique place in European folklore, occult history, and modern mystery research. Travelers speak of strange disappearances, of time behaving differently, of tunnels and doors that should not exist, and of an invisible boundary that separates the normal world from something else entirely. Long before the age of satellites and smartphones, people were already warning one another that this mountain was not like the others, that once you stepped too far inside its shadow, the rules you thought governed reality might quietly stop applying. If you stand at the foot of the Untersberg today, everything appears peaceful. Small villages dot the landscape, hikers pass by with backpacks and cameras, cows graze in alpine meadows, and the mountain watches silently as it has for millennia. And yet beneath this calm exterior lies a labyrinth of caves, fissures, and underground passages so vast that even modern mapping techniques have failed to fully chart them. Locals say the mountain is hollow, riddled with corridors that extend far beyond what science has confirmed. Some claim these tunnels are natural, others insist they were shaped by unknown hands, and a smaller group believes they serve a purpose that has nothing to do with geology at all. Stories connected to the Untersberg stretch back into pre-Christian Europe. Ancient Celtic tribes regarded mountains as liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds where the human realm brushed against the divine. That Untersberg was believed to be one such place, a gateway where spirits moved freely and where time did not flow in a straight line. According to early legends, those who entered certain caves might emerge hours later to find that days, weeks, or even years had passed outside. These stories were not framed as cautionary myths for children, but as warnings shared among adults who treated the mountain with reverence and fear in equal measure. As Christianity spread across the region, the legends did not disappear. Instead, they transformed. Pagan spirits became angels or demons, underground realms became hidden kingdoms, and portals between worlds were reinterpreted as divine tests or diabolical traps. One of the most enduring tales speaks of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who is said to sleep within the mountain, seated at a stone table, his red beard growing through it. According to the legend, he will awaken when Germany faces its greatest need, emerging from the Untersberg to restore order. Whether myth or metaphor, the story reinforces the idea that the mountain is not empty, that something waits within. Over time, reports of strange experiences continued to surface. Shepherds claimed to hear bells ringing deep underground where no animals could be. Hunters spoke of paths that twisted back on themselves, leading them to familiar places by unfamiliar routes. Travelers described moments of disorientation so intense that they felt reality itself had slipped slightly out of alignment. In many of these accounts, the experience begins subtly, with a sense of quiet that feels too complete, followed by the sensation of being watched, not by eyes, but by the mountain itself. The most unsettling stories involve disappearances. Over the centuries, individuals have vanished on or near the Untersberg under circumstances that defy simple explanation. In some cases, people were never found at all. In others, they reappeared in states of confusion, unable to account for missing time. One frequently cited incident from the early 20th century describes a man who entered a cave for a short exploration and emerged claiming only minutes had passed, only to discover that several days had gone by. His watch had stopped, his beard had not grown, and his memory between entering and exiting the cave was fragmented and dreamlike. Modern researchers often attempt to explain these accounts through natural phenomena. The Untersberg is rich in magnetic anomalies, which can interfere with compasses, electronic equipment, and even human perception. Disorientation, time distortion, and auditory hallucinations can occur in complex cave systems, especially when combined with low oxygen levels and psychological stress. And yet, these explanations, while plausible, do not fully account for the consistency of certain details repeated across centuries, cultures, and levels of education. The language changes, the symbols evolve, but the core experience remains strangely similar. In the 20th century, the Untersberg attracted the attention of occult researchers and esoteric thinkers. Some believed the mountain was connected to a network of energetic nodes across Europe, part of what later became known as ley lines. According to this theory, ancient civilizations deliberately built sacred sites at points where the Earth's natural energy was strongest, creating a grid that could be used for spiritual travel, communication, or even physical transport. In this framework, the Untersberg was not merely a mountain, but a hub, a junction point where multiple lines converged. This idea gained further traction during the Nazi era, when members of the SS showed a peculiar interest in the mountain. High-ranking officials were fascinated by myths of hidden knowledge, ancient technologies, and lost civilizations. While much of this interest was wrapped in pseudoscience and propaganda, documented visits and expeditions suggest that the Untersberg was taken seriously by those seeking power beyond conventional means. Some speculate that underground chambers were explored. Others believe experiments were conducted, though concrete evidence remains elusive. What keeps the mystery alive is not just history, but contemporary testimony. Even today, hikers report unusual sensations on the Untersberg. sudden fog that appears without warning, electronic devices malfunctioning, and moments where sound seems muffled or distorted, as if the air itself is thickened. Some describe an overwhelming urge to turn back at certain points, while others feel an inexplicable pull forward, as though something is inviting them deeper. These experiences are often dismissed as imagination, yet the sheer volume of similar accounts makes dismissal increasingly difficult. One particularly persistent claim is that the Untersberg contains portals, literal doorways that connect to other places or other times. Unlike science fiction depictions of glowing gates or swirling lights, these portals are said to be subtle, almost invisible. A step taken at the wrong moment, or in the wrong state of awareness, could allegedly carry a person somewhere else entirely. Some stories describe travelers emerging miles away from where they entered. Others speak of encounters with unfamiliar beings, described not as monsters, but as watchers or guardians. Skeptics argue that such stories reflect psychological archetypes rather than physical reality. Mountains, caves, and darkness have always symbolized the unknown, and human minds are adept at filling gaps with narrative. And yet, even skeptics admit that the Untersberg occupies a unique place in European consciousness. Few locations generate such a dense overlap of mythology, historical interest, and modern anecdote. It is as though the mountain acts as a mirror, reflecting whatever questions humanity brings to it. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Untersberg mystery is how it challenges our understanding of time. Time distortion is a recurring theme in nearly every account. Ancient or modern, people lose hours, days, or even years, while experiencing only moments. In physics, time is not as absolute as once believed. Relativity has shown that time can slow under certain conditions. Yet these effects require extreme environments far removed from a quiet alpine mountain. And still, the stories persist, stubbornly resisting neat categorization. Some researchers have proposed that the Untersberg sits atop unusual geological formations capable of generating localized space-time effects. Others suggest that underground water systems interacting with magnetic fields could influence human perception. There are even those who cautiously entertain the possibility that consciousness itself plays a role, that the mountain does not move people through space and time, but shifts their awareness into a different frame of reference altogether. What makes these ideas uncomfortable is not that they are fantastical, but that they hover just beyond what we can conclusively disprove. The mountain does not offer clear evidence, only experiences, stories, and unanswered questions. And in a world increasingly obsessed with certainty, the Untersberg remains defiantly ambiguous. As you listen to these accounts, it becomes clear that the Untersberg is less about what lies inside the mountain, and more about what it represents. A reminder that despite our technology and knowledge, there are still places that do not fully yield their secrets. Places where history, myth, and lived experience overlap in ways that refuse to be neatly separated. And perhaps that is why the stories continue, because the idea of portals, of hidden doors in the fabric of reality, speaks to a deep human intuition that the world is larger than what we perceive, that beneath the surface of the everyday lies something vast, ancient, and waiting. If the Untersberg is truly a gateway, then it does not open for everyone. It opens only under certain conditions, moments when expectation drops and awareness sharpens, or perhaps it never opens at all. And the real portal exists within the human mind, triggered by landscape, history, and suggestion. Either way, the mountain remains, silent, watching, unmoved by belief or disbelief. And as long as people continue to walk its paths, enter its caves, and listen to the stories whispered by those who came before, the mystery of the Untersberg will endure. Because some places are not meant to be solved, they are meant to be remembered. Those who claim to have experienced something unusual on the Untersberg often struggle to put it into words. They describe not fear in the traditional sense, but a deep unease mixed with fascination, as if reality itself had become thinner. Several witnesses recount moments where colors seemed slightly muted or overly vivid. Sounds arrived with a delay, or the sense of distance became unreliable. A path that should have taken 10 minutes felt endless, while hours passed unnoticed. These sensations are subtle enough to be dismissed individually, yet together they form a pattern that has repeated itself far too many times to be ignored. One of the most discussed modern cases involves a group of hikers who entered a well-known trail system on a clear morning. According to their account, they encountered a sudden, dense fog that appeared within seconds, enveloping them completely. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and electronic devices stopped functioning. Compasses spun without settling. The group continued walking, believing they were heading downhill toward a familiar exit, only to emerge hours later on the opposite side of the mountain, miles from their intended destination. What troubled them most was not the distance traveled, but the fact that none of them remembered walking the majority of it. In interviews conducted years later, each member of the group recalled fragments of the missing time differently. One spoke of hearing voices echoing through the fog, not clearly intelligible, but calm and rhythmic. Another described seeing brief flashes of light, like reflections without a visible source. A third remembered nothing at all, only a sudden sensation of waking up while already in motion. These discrepancies raise difficult questions about memory, perception, and whether a shared experience can fragment into multiple subjective realities. Cases like this blur the line between psychological phenomena and something more external. Skeptics argue that stress, fatigue, and environmental factors can easily explain such inconsistencies, but the persistence of similar accounts across decades suggests that the Untersberg acts as a catalyst, amplifying certain states of consciousness. It does not create the experience, they argue, but it unlocks it. In this view, the mountain is not a machine, but a trigger. The idea of portals, then, does not necessarily require physical doorways carved into rock. A portal could be a transition of awareness, a moment when the brain processes reality differently enough that space and time lose their usual structure. Ancient cultures often describe such states as journeys to other worlds because they lacked the language of neuroscience. Modern terminology may be more clinical, but the underlying experience remains strikingly familiar. Yet there are details that resist purely internal explanations. Objects going missing, footprints appearing where no one has walked, sounds recorded by devices that fail to capture any corresponding visual source. In one documented case, a hiker's camera continued recording while he claimed to have lost consciousness for several minutes. When the footage was reviewed, it showed steady movement through terrain he insisted he had not traversed. The timestamp revealed a gap of over an hour that could not be accounted for by battery failure or file corruption. Such anomalies fuel theories that the Untersberg is part of something larger. Some researchers suggest it may connect to other thin places around the world, locations where the boundary between dimensions is weaker. Sites like Mount Shasta in California, the Busagi Mountains in Romania, and certain regions of the Andes are often mentioned alongside the Untersberg. Despite vast geographical separation, the stories associated with these places share remarkable similarities: hidden cities, beings of light, altered time, and sudden disappearances. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. If these places are connected, then the phenomenon is not local, but systemic, a natural feature of the planet rather than an isolated anomaly. The Earth itself may possess regions where reality behaves differently, shaped by forces we do not yet fully understand. Gravity, electromagnetism, consciousness, and geology may intersect in ways science has only begun to explore. The Untersberg's extensive cave system adds another layer to this mystery. With hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, many still unmapped, it is one of the most complex underground networks in Europe. Some caves descend sharply, others stretch horizontally for miles. Water flows unpredictably through hidden channels, sometimes vanishing entirely before re-emerging elsewhere. These subterranean pathways could easily conceal chambers that have never been seen by modern eyes. Local folklore insists that not all caves are accessible at all times. Certain entrances are said to appear only under specific conditions, triggered by weather, time of day, or even the mental state of the person approaching them. While such claims are dismissed by conventional science, they align uncannily with reports of sudden openings and passages that cannot later be found again. There are also accounts of encounters within the mountain. Not monsters but figures, described as human-like, calm and distant. Witnesses often emphasize their eyes, noting an unusual clarity or depth, and a sense of intelligence that feels ancient. Communication, when it occurs, is rarely verbal. Instead, information seems to arrive fully formed, as understanding rather than language. These encounters, if real, suggest that the Untersberg is not merely a gateway, but a meeting point. Of course, such stories invite skepticism, and rightly so. Human perception is fragile, especially in unfamiliar and extreme environments. Yet even skeptics must grapple with the question of why the same motifs recur so consistently. Why time distortion? Why subterranean realms? Why guardians rather than predators? These are not random hallucinations, but structured narratives that echo across cultures and centuries. As technology advances, new attempts are made to measure the Untersberg's anomalies. Magnetic field surveys reveal irregular patterns. Seismic readings suggest hollow regions larger than expected. Still, none of these findings conclusively prove the existence of portals. They merely deepen the mystery, hinting at complexity without offering closure. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Untersberg phenomenon is its indifference. The mountain does not appear hostile, nor benevolent. It does not choose heroes or villains. It simply exists, unaffected by the stories projected onto it. Those who experience something unusual are not always seekers of mystery. Many stumble into it by accident, unprepared and unwilling. This randomness suggests that whatever is happening does not operate on human narratives of purpose or destiny. And yet, people keep returning. Researchers, mystics, skeptics, hikers, and tourists alike feel drawn to the Untersberg. Some hope to find proof, others seek experience, many leave with nothing at all. This inconsistency is frustrating, but it may also be the point. If the mountain revealed its secrets easily, they would lose their power. In the end, the Untersberg forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our understanding of reality is provisional. We build models and explanations that work most of the time, but there are edges where those models falter. At those edges, uncertainty waits patiently. The stories of portals, time slips, and hidden realms may never be fully verified, but neither can they be fully erased. They exist in the space between belief and disbelief, where curiosity thrives. And perhaps that is where they belong. There is a moment, described by several people who have spent long hours on the Untersberg, when the mountain seems to change its presence. Nothing visibly dramatic happens. The sky may remain clear, the wind light, the path familiar, and yet something subtle shifts. The air feels heavier, sound becomes strangely absorbed, and the sense of time begins to loosen its grip. It is often in these moments that people report an overwhelming awareness of being somewhere that does not fully belong to the everyday world. Psychologists would say this is a dissociative state, triggered by isolation and sensory monotony, and that explanation is not without merit. But what complicates matters is how consistently these moments occur in specific areas of the mountain. Certain ridges, cave entrances, and forest clearings are mentioned again and again, as if the geography itself plays a role in shaping the experience. It is not random, it is localized. Some researchers believe that Untersberg functions like a natural amplifier. Small shifts in perception are intensified, magnified by environmental factors that remain poorly understood. Magnetic irregularities, underground water flows, and mineral composition may all interact in subtle ways with the human nervous system. In such an environment, the boundary between internal and external experience becomes harder to define. Thoughts feel intrusive. Emotions arise without clear cause. Time stretches and compresses unpredictably. But there is another interpretation, one that has persisted far longer than any scientific theory. According to ancient belief, certain places exist at the intersection of worlds, not separate dimensions in the science fiction sense, but overlapping layers of reality that normally remain isolated from one another. Mountains, caves, and deep forests were seen as natural thresholds, places where the veil thinned. The Untersberg fits this pattern with remarkable precision. In medieval accounts, monks traveling through the region warned of areas where prayer felt unusually intense, as if words carried more weight. Some claimed visions, others spoke of temptations, encounters that tested faith rather than reason. These experiences were framed morally, yet they mirror modern reports in structure if not in interpretation. The mountain provokes experiences that feel meaningful, personal, and destabilizing. One recurring theme in Untersberg lore is the idea of return. Those who pass through the mountain's mysteries often come back changed, though rarely in ways that can be easily measured. Some become withdrawn, struggling to articulate what they experienced. Others develop an intense fascination, returning again and again in search of something they cannot define. A few reports profound shifts in worldview, a sense that reality is far less rigid than they once believed. Time distortion remains the most disturbing element of all. Even among hardened skeptics, this aspect raises unease. Time is foundational to human experience. To question it is to question memory, identity, and causality itself. When individuals insist they experienced minutes while hours passed, or that they aged while nothing around them did, we are forced to confront either widespread delusion or an incomplete understanding of time itself. Physics tells us that time is not absolute. It bends near massive objects, slows at high velocities, and behaves differently depending on the observer. These principles are well established, yet they occur under conditions far removed from a quiet alpine mountain. And still, the stories persist, unchanged by centuries of retelling. It is as if the Untersberg sits at a crossroads between ancient intuition and modern theory, challenging both without fully satisfying either. Some have speculated that the mountain acts as a kind of temporal echo chamber. Events do not move forward cleanly, but resonate, overlapping with past and future moments. In this view, the portals are not doorways to other worlds, but intersections of different temporal layers. A person entering such a zone might briefly step out of sync, experiencing reality at a different pace. When they return, the discrepancy feels impossible, yet it is real to them. Others take the idea further, suggesting that consciousness itself may be the key. If time is experienced rather than measured, then altering consciousness alters time. The Untersberg, in this framework, becomes a catalyst for altered states that humanity once accessed through ritual, isolation, and symbolic descent. The cave becomes the womb, the mountain the axis, the journey inward, a journey across thresholds of awareness. This interpretation does not require hidden civilizations or advanced beings, though it does not exclude them either. It simply suggests that the human mind, when placed in certain environments, can access modes of perception that modern life rarely allows. In doing so, it confronts aspects of reality that feel foreign because they are no longer familiar. Yet the persistence of guardian-like figures in the stories complicates this view. Whether described as monks, ancient men, luminous beings, or silent observers, these presences appear across centuries with unsettling consistency. They do not attack, they do not instruct openly, they watch, they test, and they often appear at moments of decision, when a person considers going deeper or turning back. Symbolically, this makes sense. Every threshold has its guardian, every transition demands a choice. But symbolism alone cannot explain why unrelated individuals, separated by time and culture, describe such similar encounters in the same location. Perhaps the most unsettling conclusion is also the simplest. The Untersberg may not be doing anything at all. It may simply be revealing what is already there. Human perception, when stripped of distraction and certainty, begins to notice how fragile the familiar world truly is. The mountain does not create portals. It exposes them. In this sense, the Untersberg becomes a reminder rather than a mystery, a reminder that reality is not fixed, that time is experienced rather than owned, and that the boundaries we rely on are thinner than we prefer to admit. The portals are not entrances to somewhere else. They are exits from the illusion of complete understanding. This is why the mountain resists closure. Every attempt to define it collapses into ambiguity. Every explanation leaves something unresolved, and that unresolved space is precisely what keeps the stories alive. As long as people seek certainty, the Untersberg will offer doubt. As long as people demand proof, it will respond with experience. And as long as humans feel that the world holds more than it reveals, places like this will continue to matter. Because not all mysteries exist to be solved. Some exist to remind us that we are standing on the edge of something vast, and the Untersberg, silent and ancient, will remain there long after the last story is told, waiting patiently for the next person to step too close and wonder whether the ground beneath their feet is as solid as it seems. What makes the Untersberg especially unsettling is not what people claim to see, but what they claim to feel after they leave. Many describe a lingering sensation that lasts days, sometimes weeks, a subtle displacement, as if something inside them never fully returned. Everyday routines feel strangely artificial. Time seems faster, conversations more distant, and silence heavier than before. These after effects are rarely dramatic, but they are persistent, and they are often what convinces people that whatever happened was not simply imagination. Several individuals report vivid dreams following their visit. Dreams of underground halls, slow-moving figures, or endless corridors lit by a soft, indirect glow. In these dreams, there is rarely fear. Instead, there is a sense of waiting, as if the dreamer has arrived too early or too late. Upon waking, many feel a strong emotional residue, a sense that the dream carried information rather than symbolism. This has led some researchers to suggest that the Untersberg experience may extend beyond physical presence, influencing subconscious processes long after contact has ended. Anthropologists note that this pattern mirrors ancient initiation rites. Across cultures, initiates were led into caves, forests, or mountains, isolated from normal time and social structure. Upon returning, they were considered transformed, not because they gained new knowledge, but because their perception of reality had shifted. The Untersberg may function as an unintentional initiatory space, one that modern people enter without preparation, language, or guidance. This lack of framework may explain why some visitors struggle to integrate their experience. Without symbolic structures to contain what happened, the mind oscillates between fascination and denial. People search for explanations online, compare stories, and oscillate between belief and skepticism. In doing so, they perpetuate the mythology, adding new layers to an already dense narrative field. The mountain itself remains indifferent. Rescue teams emphasize that most disappearances are resolved through mundane means. Weather changes rapidly. Terrain is complex. Human error is common. And yet, even experienced mountaineers admit that the Untersberg feels different. Not dangerous in an obvious way, but unpredictable. A place where intuition becomes unreliable. One particularly revealing detail is how often people ignore their instincts on the mountain. Many accounts include a moment where the person felt an urge to turn back, to stop, or to choose a different path, but dismissed it as irrational. Shortly afterward, disorientation begins. This sequence appears so frequently that it suggests the mountain amplifies the consequences of inattention. It does not force entry into mystery, it allows it. The idea of portals, then, may be less about physical openings and more about moments of misalignment. A decision delayed by seconds, a step taken without awareness, a thought drifting inward instead of outward. In such moments, the mind loosens its grip on linear reality, and experience shifts accordingly. The portal is not a doorway you walk through, it is a moment you fall into. Some physicists who have examined reports from the Untersberg avoid metaphysical language entirely. They speak instead of nonlinear systems, feedback loops, and emergent phenomena. In complex environments, small changes can produce disproportionate effects. Consciousness, they argue, is part of that system. When environmental complexity reaches a certain threshold, perception destabilizes. The result feels supernatural, but may be entirely natural. And yet, even this explanation fails to address the emotional coherence of the stories. Hallucinations are usually chaotic. Untersberg experiences are not. They are structured, symbolic, and often strangely calm. People do not describe panic, they describe AHO, neutrality, or quiet observation. This emotional consistency suggests that something is guiding the experience, whether internally or externally. There is also the question of why the stories persist despite modernization. GPS devices, satellite imagery, and constant connectivity should have erased such mysteries. Instead, they coexist with them. Devices fail, signals drop, batteries drain. Technology, which usually anchors us in certainty, becomes unreliable on the mountain. This technological fragility reinforces the sense that the Untersberg exists slightly outside the systems we depend on. Some have suggested that this is precisely why such places matter now more than ever. In a world mapped, measured, and monitored, the existence of uncertainty becomes unsettling. The Untersberg refuses to be fully captured by data. It remains experiential rather than informational. You cannot download its meaning. You have to encounter it. This may explain why the mountain attracts people during periods of personal transition. Grief, burnout, identity crisis, and spiritual searching often appear in the backgrounds of Untersberg visitors. They are not always conscious of this connection, but it emerges in retrospect. The mountain seems to respond to inner thresholds as much as outer ones. In this light, the legends of portals take on a different meaning. A portal is not an escape from reality, but a confrontation with it, stripped of distraction. When familiar reference points dissolve, what remains is awareness itself. That experience can be terrifying or liberating, depending on how prepared one is to face it. And preparation, perhaps, is what ancient cultures understood better than we do. They approached such places with ritual, patience, and humility. Modern visitors arrive with expectations, cameras, and schedules. The mismatch may be the source of discomfort. The mountain does not adapt to us. We must adapt to it. As the stories continue to accumulate, the Untersberg becomes less a question of belief and more a challenge to perspective. You do not have to believe in portals to acknowledge that something unusual happens there. You only have to accept that not all experiences fit neatly into existing categories. This acceptance does not weaken rational thought, it strengthens it. It reminds us that knowledge is provisional, that mystery is not an enemy of understanding, but its frontier. The Untersberg stands at that frontier, not demanding belief, only attention, and perhaps that is its final lesson. That the world is not exhausted by explanation, that there are still places where silence carries weight, and that sometimes the most important journeys do not take us somewhere else, but return us to ourselves, changed in ways we cannot fully explain. When all the stories are set aside, when theories fall quiet and explanations begin to blur, the Untersberg remains exactly where it has always been. It does not confirm, it does not deny, it does not respond to belief or skepticism. It simply exists, ancient and unmoved, watching generations come and go while carrying its silence forward through time. Perhaps this is why the mountain unsettles us. We live in an age obsessed with answers, with clarity, with immediate resolution. We expect every mystery to yield to analysis, every anomaly to fit within a model. And yet the Untersberg resists that impulse. It offers experience without explanation, sensation without conclusion. It reminds us that certainty is not the natural state of the universe, but a temporary comfort we construct. Those who walk its paths often arrive expecting something extraordinary to happen. Many leave disappointed, carrying only photographs and tired legs. Others leave unsettled, unable to say exactly why. A few leave changed, though the change itself defies language, and perhaps that is the most honest outcome of all. The mountain does not perform, it does not reveal itself on demand. It simply reflects back whatever state of awareness is brought into its presence. The legends of portals may never be proven in any conventional sense. No definitive doorway has been measured, no mechanism fully documented. And yet the persistence of these stories suggests that something real is being encountered, even if its nature remains elusive. Whether the portals exist in stone, in time, or in consciousness itself may ultimately be less important than the fact that people continue to experience moments that challenge their understanding of reality. In the end, the Untersberg confronts us with a question rather than an answer. Not a question about mountains or caves, but about ourselves. How much of what we call reality is shaped by habit and expectation? How much lies just beyond perception, waiting for the right conditions to emerge? And how comfortable are we, really, with the idea that not everything is meant to be known? Perhaps the true portal is not hidden in the rock, but in the willingness to sit with uncertainty, to accept that some places exist not to be solved, but to be experienced. That some mysteries persist not because we lack intelligence, but because they occupy a different category altogether. The Untersberg does not demand belief, it only asks presence, and in a world increasingly detached from silence, presence may be the rarest state of all. So if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of that mountain, feeling the air grow still and time seem slightly out of place, remember this: you are not required to go further. You are not required to understand. Sometimes, noticing the question is enough, and whether the portals are real or symbolic, physical or internal, one thing remains certain. As long as humans continue to wonder, to question, and to listen to the quiet places of the world, the Untersberg will continue to stand as it always has, silent, patient, waiting, not for proof, but for awareness.